name is Sigrid de Vries. I'm Director General of ACEA, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. And I'm joined by Tommaso Pardi, who is an independent researcher from the French National Center for Scientific Research. The automotive industry is going through a most significant transformation. And this is certainly not an understatement. It's a really systemic transformation with multiple players involved, fierce global competition with new players coming to market, and also a radically changing geopolitical landscape. Now, Tommaso has done a study recently to look at the auto industry, its future, the political landscape, and what could be done. Tommaso, we do want to sound the alarm as ACEA, but we don't want to be fear mongers. So what, in your view, should policymakers now do to help us on the way?
I think the first thing the policymakers should do is to pay more attention to what is happening, to wake up and react to the fact that the current transition towards 100% battery electric vehicle sales by 2035 is clearly much more problematic than initially thought. And I believe that the problem is not the target. This is very important for me. I think that the 2035 ban is feasible, but it becomes problematic if we do not have ambitious, complementary, coherent policies and regulations to bring the industry there and to support also the transition for the European member states. And the Green Deal is about three important things: a very efficient trajectory towards decarbonization, a just transition that doesn't leave anybody behind, and a transition that is good for the industry, that keeps the European automotive industry competitive. And I'm afraid right now the current transition is not delivering on any of these goals.
The transformation is about three things. You just said decarbonization, a just transition, and a competitive European industry. And I believe you also have three main issues that you want to go into a bit deeper. So let's break that down. What's the first issue that should be addressed in your view?
I think the first issue in the agenda is affordability. The battery electric vehicle car in Europe is the most expensive worldwide, and there are reasons for that. I think the main reason is that what the European Commission is doing is asking car makers to electrify an internal combustion engine vehicle. So what is happening is that you add 500 kilograms of battery to a vehicle which is already overweighted, overpowered, and very expensive. And what you get is a 1.82 tons battery electric vehicle that costs 65,000 euros on average. That was the average price of a battery electric vehicle in 2023. Now, what do we need to make cars that are different? Well, we need a dedicated framework, a battery electric vehicle regulatory framework that help the car makers to make lighter, more energy efficient, cheaper, and with smaller battery vehicles. And in order to sell these vehicles, you need also an ecosystem that surrounds the car with more recharging stations, with perhaps a new mobility system that helps the consumers to use a car that is different. And you don't do that in a very uncoordinated way. You need Europe to set up targets, you need states to set up regulation policy, and you need cities to find out the ways to do that. Now, what is actually happening is the opposite. So I think that when you look at China, for example, that has been very successful in driving down cost of electric cars. Why? Because they focus on energy efficiency, they focus on weight, they focus on several parameters, and they coordinate the credits with that. So I think there is a lot to learn from different regulations, and Europe could fill the gap in this specific field.
So affordability was the first issue. What is the second?
Now, the second issue, and it's not really a surprise, is the fact that we lack in Europe a battery value chain. We do not produce our batteries. And clearly the European Union has put the electric car in front of the battery, or if you will, a raw material horse. And this is a problem because it creates a strategic dependence for the European automotive industry on batteries, technologies, and raw materials that come mainly from Asia and mainly from China. And the wake-up call here came from the United States under the form of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a very important piece of legislation, amongst others, enacted recently by the Biden administration. And you can see there what is lacking in Europe, which is a coordinated industrial policies that bring together production credits for developing gigafactories or other components of the electric battery vehicle, consumer credits for buying the cars, strategies about which materials we want to extract, where, and subsidize that as well, and then which technology we want, because depending on the chemistry of the battery, you need different materials. And for example, the United States is focusing on cobalt-free chemistries, and so that provides a direction and coordinates the whole effort. And all of that is lacking in Europe. So I think this is the second big problem we have. We need a much more coordinated, clear and strong answers from the European Commission on these grounds. And I think we all agree that the Net Zero Act, Industrial Act, the Raw Materials Act, and the battery regulation are too disconnected one from each other and too not enough ambitious. And we need something more in order to catch up.
So a working value chain was the second issue. Now there's a third important issue that you would like to address.
Now, the third issue is that we don't have a level playing field in Europe right now. This is clear because the single market is a very open market for automotive trade for very good reason. Europe is exporting a lot of cars, a lot of products. It is a net exporter. This is mainly for premium brands, but it works also for the other car manufacturer because Europe was protected also from foreign competition because of the ICE technology on which the European automotive industry had a strong competitive advantage. In particular, these are powertrains that were only manufactured and developed basically in Europe, at least for personal cars. Now, with the battery technology is the opposite. The foreign competitors have a competitive advantage, and since the single market is open, then they can get in very easily. And this is a problem because this competitive advantage generates asymmetries. The race is not even. Why pure battery electric vehicles like the Chinese new energy vehicle manufacturer Tesla have a competitive advantage? Well, first, they've started earlier. They hold very dominant position in their domestic markets, which are bigger than in Europe. They are much more vertically integrated in the battery supply chain, so they have easier access to raw materials. They have bigger economy of scale, so less cost. And also they have better capital evaluation, better access to capital. So if for leasing, for example, electric cars, this is a very important competitive advantage. And last but not least, they don't have to phase out 17, 19 million ICE capacity that the European car makers have to do. And this creates these important asymmetries. Now, I do not think that trade barriers will be the solution here for several different reasons, including the fact that China is one of the most important trade partners of Europe. But at the same time, the fact that the European Union is the only player in this race that is still abiding by the WTO rules is also a problem. I think that, for example, the eco-bonus that has been recently put forward in France that takes account of the life cycle of the vehicle, of the carbon footprint, is a good way to move forward because connects environmental regulations, which are rationally very good. Why should I import a battery which is 3 times more polluting from China when I can make it in Europe and that is cheaper and more environmental friendly? So let's make regulations that help the industry to create these localized battery value chain, but also keep the competition a little bit out from Europe. Of course, Chinese car manufacturers to invest in Europe and play by the same rules. But I think that we need to scale up these, connect with the other regulations, and that possibly could be a way forward to realign the playing field.
Thank you very much for taking us with you in your insights, in your research, and really discussing how to win the race going forward.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
ACEA, driving mobility for Europe.